Welcome to episode 27 of Leading People with me, Gerry Murray. So you've developed, for example, tools around job success, right? Could you maybe explain a little bit how that works for if anybody out there saying, but how does all this work? We know we hear about, they've got all these great personality tests and all that. Maybe you'll unpack that for us in a minute about why they're not doing what you can do. But how do these tools, let's get people into an organization. Why, for example, does a personality test not really give you the information you need? The big 5-based personality test versus what you can help somebody understand about the candidate.
Okay. So typically what people mean by personality tests is there's this general set of traits or characteristics that are very general and that basically, people are put in these categories of personality. And this includes the big 5 as well. And then the hope is that you can somehow apply that to every job that there is out there. But the problem is the research on that is really based on what makes people successful in general. And the real problem with that is what makes people successful in general is quite different than what makes people successful in specific jobs, because there's huge variations depending upon the job. And it's also a one-sided viewpoint. So we're looking at, what are these personality traits? And we usually ask some, relatively tricky questions to try to determine the person's so-called personality. And that already puts people's guard up, and you're more likely to get skewed answers from people who are, answering those things. Whereas if you take a different tack and you just simply have a large array of, what things do you like doing? And what's important to you about employment, you're not only able to glean that same psychological information about their behavior from that, but you're also basing it on what's important to them. And that doesn't get their defenses up. They're much less likely to lie about it, and they're much more less able to lie about it because there's no negative questions being asked. And any negative or counterproductive potential behavior is a result of looking at the combination of their choices, and that gets into the paradox, which we'll talk about later. But so that's the critical element that you're looking for.
Yeah, and you designed a questionnaire that actually at the end creates about 175 data points.
Right.
And you've used an approach which
and you have to have them. Yeah. You have to have that many data points because every job is very, very different. And so you need a lot of data points, and they need to be configured differently for every job.
Yeah.
And we do that by collecting a lot of research and looking at the relationship between high performers and low performers in specific jobs. And then we're able to identify the specific factors that relate to high performance and low performance in specific jobs. And I can tell you they're very, very different for the different jobs. And so it's a complete fallacy to think I'm going to then create a set of things that are going to apply, a small set of things that are going to apply to every job. That doesn't exist in nature. And if you do that, you're going to get a pretty low correlation when as far as the results are concerned. And you're going to get much less buy-in. So there's really an important element is you've got to get buy-in from the person. Now, whether you're using it for recruitment or development, they have to feel this is relevant to me and this is important to me. And it has to foster a conversation that's going to be productive in terms of the person's employment and ability to target different, developmental needs as well. And you're just simply not going to get that when you're putting something up and say, this is a personality test, and we're testing your personality. That creates a lot of problems. And of course, psychologists know that,
Yeah. So some of them still hang on to but I suppose it's this sunk cost fallacy or the confirmation bias where people have been using these other tools for so long that they feel they have to stand by them, and yet there are other ways of getting at this. And one of the things I think if our listeners are kind of trying to figure this out is that, as you say, there might be 170 5 factors in there, but as you we often are only looking at plus or minus 40 factors because they're tailored to that specific role.
For a specific job. And also the other thing is typically, personality assessments use simple correlations. So they say, oh, it correlates with performance or doesn't, and we'll use it. But actually, there's different types of correlations. So some factors are really different than other factors. So, for example, with some factors, like you have takes initiative. Well, the more initiative for some jobs, the more initiative you take, the better it is. But for other jobs, you only need to take at least a moderate amount of initiative. And having more initiative doesn't really help. But if you're really lacking initiative, it can hinder. So, and that's a very different type of correlation. And unless you're dealing with those things in that way, and then it becomes a detractor. Yeah. And there's also traits that are detractors as well. So you can't just look at what we call success traits. You have to look at the detractors that can hinder the person's success and satisfaction in the job. Yeah. So and that's a big difference as well in terms of what we do.